from a webinar by the Union of Concerned Scientists. It means synergistic epidemic. It was developed by Meryl Singer in the mid-1990s to refer to the aggregation of two or more concurrent or sequential epidemics in a population with biological interactions. And so what we're facing, the realities right now, are all of these things coming at us at once: widespread disease, pandemic, racism, and climate change. So this is really heavy, and we're all feeling it. These factors intersect particularly in communities of color, which are as much at risk from the ravages of a weather disaster as they are from the ravages of a novel coronavirus, and the racism, which we're all, it's kind of, we've peeled back those layers and we're starting to band together and protest. And it's just very heavy. It's a lot to take on. The realization that the Earth is warming at speeds that are shocking, and we need to turn it around. So, but I want to start, and I know this is all really heavy, but it is our reality right now. I want to start and just check in with all of you and ask you, how have the recent months affected you personally and professionally, and how have you had to adapt and pivot?
All right. Is there an order we go in, or should we just jump in?
Go for it, Tom.
Okay. Well, I'll start with that because I feel like, and I'm sure everyone here feels the same way. First of all, hello everybody, everyone that I can see and everyone I can't see. I'm very happy to be here today to see familiar faces and to talk about things I know that are important to all of us, which is about design, sustainability, and also just really keeping an open dialogue. And I think so much of what is important and what I've learned from this recent turn of events is that staying connected and staying communicative and being a part of the solution and not so much about continuing the dialogue of the problem. And I think that that's something that I think that we've all been, we probably can all remember those moments where we were very, very worried, very concerned, out of sorts, not really sure what was happening, felt disconnected, and you were maybe, just feeling very fearful, And I think that one of the most important things that's come out of this is that there is this really greater understanding of communication. And I'm so happy to see what we're doing right now, which is really working together, communicating, staying connected. This is not the first time that I'm seeing some of the people that are here in front of me in the same format. So it is really important that when you're kind of feeling isolated and worried and you feel like there's nothing you can do, to really reach out to your friends, to your peers, and to stay connected and be a part of the solution. I think so much of what's come out of these recent months is that we understand the power of everyone doing a little bit, this grassroots movement. When we all come together and we support each other, we have a very strong voice. But when we're all sort of isolated in our own spaces, it can be scary. You can feel alone. You can feel like you have no ability to make anything positive happen. So I think that what we're doing now and what so many people are doing in terms of this type of communication that I think wouldn't have happened for 5 years or maybe 3 years or 4 years. I think that the recent situations have really encouraged us to figure out how to use technology to stay connected and to bring our ideas together, our voices together, and understand that we still, even though we have to stay home and wear masks and sanitize everything every 2 seconds and really be thoughtful about being outwardly healthy for not only ourselves but for the world around us. I think that has become something that we would have never thought that we would be doing this 4 months ago. as often as we are, and how much we need this. I mean, I think that, imagine if we were not communicating and seeing each other. I saw right before all of this happened, I was sitting with Corey, and we were going over a project he was working on in, sort of the restaurant at the top of 200 Lex. Libby and I bump into each other at airports more often than not. So, we're all kind of doing our thing, and then all of a sudden you're kind of out of the loop. And I think that this is helping us stay in the loop, work as a team, make a difference, and understand that we can work together and make change. And it's all about these small moments that we all come together and make one big moment and one big sort of step forward.
One thing I would say about how it kind of affected me personally when all of this happened is, and Thom and I have talked about this before too, that, I just really felt like I was just going, in an airplane every week, every other week, all over the place, just working like a maniac. And obviously I love what I do, but at the same time, I think when everything happened in March, it was just a hard reset. It was just a moment of the world, the planet, life, everything just saying, stop, slow down. And it did give me a chance to just catch my breath, look around, appreciate what I have, still working, but working in a little bit more of a mindful way, I think, and mindful about what do I want my life to look like, and can I take a little bit more control of it and craft it and design the way my life is going to continue on more in just much more control. And I think also it's made me more mindful to pick and choose and be a little bit more careful about things that I do decide to do, or events, or whatever that's going to look like in the next bit. I think it has been a good hard reset. And then with the way, just everything that's been happening in the world in the last few months, that's been a moment to just step back as well and see, what can I do in the future? How can I change my actions, my process, my business? And so in my positive Pollyanna way is, the reset has been good for me and good for my business. And I feel like I've had a chance to really sort of gather things and just take a deep breath. And I think the planet has had a little bit of a deep breath. So I think being mindful of moving forward is something that I'm excited about.
Agreed.
Mike, I think, I didn't have hair before this situation took place. So it's definitely not coming back now.
I'm wearing a wig. Does that matter?
I love the lace front, Thom. I love the lace front. But I would say that, all jokes aside, it has been it's felt like emotional whiplash for me. And I think that, obviously when the coronavirus pandemic really took its full shape in March and we shut down, that was the first whiplash moment when the entire world came to a screeching halt and our industry went through so much uncertainty. But then I think I got another second impact of that whiplash moment with the George Floyd situation, because in our industry, there are very few who look like me. And so as a result, the outreach was overwhelming. We have received, and I'm not exaggerating here, we have received nearly 300 calls from editors, various magazines, local and national newspapers, bloggers, social media platforms, different companies who are looking to expand their engagement with people of color. And everyone's like, what are your thoughts on this? And then you have all your friends who are not racist, but never quite thought about certain things a certain way. And so everyone's calling and venting and sharing, and then you have the Black community in your industry who are also calling and asking you, what should we do? How do we handle this? How do I navigate through this? All of your white friends and all of your other culture friends are saying, you know, oh my God, what can we do? So for me, I felt like a therapist in the last few months. And and when I say that, I'm not complaining, but at the end of the day, I also have to cope with the same situations that everyone else is dealing with.
Right.
And so I feel like I'm holding up my friends and my community, which I should, and I'm grateful to do it, but I haven't had a chance to really, I think, come to terms with a lot of it because I've been so busy helping everyone else cope with it. So it's definitely been like a whiplash moment, and I think that to Thom and Libby's point, I'm glad that it happened. It was bound to happen at some point. It just happened to be a confluence of all of it all
Right.
at once. And
Right.
I think that 2020 has been basically like a proverbial mother telling each and every one of us, 7 billion people, to go to our room and sit down in the corner and think about all of these things. And we've been thinking and we've been talking, and I'm glad we've had this inflection point to consider where we're at as a species, as humans.
I just want to say one thing. I think what you said is so right on, and I think one of the things that I think is so interesting about this moment, whatever we're talking about, all of the different sort of things in the world around us that have become so, like, I think sort of glaringly obvious, things that, because we were all moving at such a fast pace, a lot of the things that are happening around us, we maybe recognize them, maybe we don't recognize them, but we don't recognize the severity of it because you don't really have the time to really stop and think about it. I think having the world attention for months, people are sitting, they're thinking, like Corey was just saying, but also in addition to thinking, they have our attention, the world has our, you know, whatever's happening at that moment has our full attention. And it is amazing to see how, I would say, just sort of crazy and bizarre a lot of the situations are that I don't think that we realized, but also it's really amazing to see how so many different people with so many different backgrounds and so many different points of view are now coming together in a way that I don't ever recall, you know, seeing the diversity of people supporting each other. And so I do think that, you know, right now there has been this kind of, like Corey was saying, this sort of overwhelming, you know, kind of like reality moment of like, wow, I can sit here and actually see, listen, and think about what's really going on. And then you have really, you're given the opportunity to say, like, am I going to be a part of the solution, or am I going to just be a part of the, oh, woe is me, I can't believe this is happening? Because some people are unable to breathe, and if you are lucky enough to be one of the people that is able to breathe and able to, like, stand up and speak and able to reach out and help another person and be a part of the solution, I just think that how could you possibly not say, like, this is that moment? And, you know, it goes beyond being on the right side of history. It's just about doing what's necessary to move forward. And if you have the strength and the opportunity and the wherewithal at whatever level to be a part of that, for God's sakes, jump in.
Yeah.
Thom, I'm glad that you used the word moment, because it really does feel like all of these challenges together is causing us to really have a sort of reckoning to figure out how we can battle some of these injustices, from climate injustice to racial and socioeconomic injustices, together. And there is nothing that we can't achieve together. And I do want to keep we have a reality check here, but I do want to keep that positivity, because I really do. I have seen some amazing change take place even in the last few months that, as a few of you said, I'm not sure we would have seen if we hadn't really been called to do so by some really hard things. And so on that point, how do we all make sure that this is not just a moment, but a movement? You know, Corey, you were talking about burnout. You have double burnout because you're a, you know, you're a voice in the industry that has been so severely underrepresented, you know, and so you're carrying a lot of extra burdens, especially right now, while you're dealing with all the things that we all are, you know, some insecurity about, you know, the next project, or,
Right.
you know, what's the economy going to do? What's politics going to do? You know, there's a lot going on right now. So how do we kind of band together, settle into this as more of a movement and not just a moment?
Well, I think for me, I definitely wanted to spread out the message regarding the sustainable platform that we're talking about today. So obviously, we announced it as an organization, as a council a couple of weeks ago, but I deliberately held back from announcing it to my platform because I want to space it out from everyone else announcing it, because I want to keep the narrative going beyond this talk. And so I was talking with Susan earlier today, like, I want to put this out there again, but I'm actually releasing my information to my followers after this talk so they can come back and watch and carry on the narrative, because it can't be in the moment, whether it's racial injustice, social injustice, climate change, and the need to fix the climate problems that we're facing. It can't be the flavor of the month. It has to be a consistent part of our daily diet, our daily meal, our daily intake. And so I think for a lot of us, it's about really planning when and how we're going to attack the narrative, and to continuously do so over a sustained period of time. For a while there, the Black Lives Matter was raging on social media as far as the hashtag and the discussion. But in recent weeks, it has tapered off. For a while there was the raging discussion about everyone wearing masks and the pandemic. It's taping off. People are getting back to this thing. We get to keep the energy and the momentum up, because becoming complacent is how we got in these problems, in these situations in the first place. So we have to keep the momentum going.
One thing I would say too, and to sort of speak to what you're asking, Erika, of what can we do? And one thing in regards to sustainability and the environment is the Sustainable Furnishings Council. We have just started a great campaign called Just One. And the notion behind that campaign is, if everybody did just one thing, and it's exactly what you said a few minutes ago, we can start to make a difference.
Yeah.
Wow, what would happen? And so the campaign is it definitely is targeting furniture manufacturers, people in business. What's one thing that they can do in their manufacturing process? You know, what can they do to make a difference? And it trickles down to us as designers. It trickles down to consumers. If everybody did just one thing, and that's not a big deal for us to do just one thing, there would be significant change. And you know, I think what's important too is, even if there are people that don't think they're very eco-minded or eco-friendly, it's one of the things I love about Susan. She is such a cheerleader, and she's like, anybody can do just one thing. So I encourage people to think about it. What are some of the things that you can do? Use less electricity, use less water, recycle clothes, recycle all kinds of things. So I think if all of us sort of took this new campaign initiative and did just one thing, we would start to make a collective difference.
Well, and I think on that note, it's not just people, individuals doing that one thing. It's about companies recognizing their responsibility to do one thing. And I also think that, you know, right now, I think one of the things that and going back to what Corey was talking about, how things seem to be fizzling out, I think that right now, hopefully, what is happening is that whatever happens politically as we move forward, hopefully there's going to be a stronger and better understanding of the importance and the power of all of these issues, whether we're talking about climate, change, or we're talking about social or racial injustice. We're talking about things that, again, I think that it's a part of one of the things that we have to do is help put the right people in our communities, in our states, in our government, and get people that are really sensitive to the sort of this concept, because I think so much of what we're talking about, if you were to isolate each one of them and say, oh my God, look at all of these things that we have to figure out, it feels somewhat overwhelming. But if you really boil it down to communication, thoughtfulness, doing one thing, being a part of the solution, if you look at just living your life with that philosophy, whether you're talking to a manufacturing partner, whether you're talking to your neighbor, whether you're talking to kids that are going to school, whether it's a philosophy. And the most important one thing that we can all do is adopt, first and foremost, the understanding that almost everything we're talking about is transparency, communication, honesty, fairness. I mean, these are basic concepts. And if you apply those basic concepts to your everyday life, encourage other people to do that. Recycling, being kind to other people, being thoughtful of everyone's situation and not just your own, starts to become part of your dialogue. Whether you're like talking about, hey, why don't we use recycled springs in our furniture, because that just makes sense. Like, it doesn't cost anymore, it's available, it's the right thing to do, and this is the way we think. It's not that, sometimes people have these signs up in their house like, be nice to your neighbor. I'm like, do you really need a sign to tell you to be nice to your neighbor? I mean, like, if you forget that, then we have nothing in common. You know what I mean? It's just like, really. So I do think that it's just, first and foremost, the one thing is, you've got to just have a philosophy of like, just the core basic, things that will actually make each one of the things that we're talking about possible. Because, if you don't have the support and the understanding of the world around you, and have the people that can help us make these things actually go from a grassroots movement to actually something that is recognized as, as for the way that we need to, sort of run the world that we live in. I just feel like, that's really the first thing that we all have to do. And then I think I agree with Libby, and I think it's so smart that you brought that up, because it's true. It's just like, maybe it's your light bulbs, maybe it's your using, not using your AC when you're not at home, maybe it's filtering water and not buying bottled water, whatever it is you can do, and showing younger people the importance of these things. And when people say, well, are you going to make a difference? You say, no, I'm not, but we all are. So if we all have this common goal and this common understanding, and that one thing, I think, is the springboard that makes all of those other singular moments just part of the way we live.
Very nice. Let's talk about the unseen and the unheard in design. Among your many, many roles as designers is that you are educators. And one of my favorite questions to ask designers, because it's so, so important, is the true cost of cheap, like fast fashion, fast design. How do you educate and communicate to your clients and fellow designers the importance of avoiding cheap design, knockoffs, etc., having a more transparent manufacturing process? Where do you even begin to improve that unseen in design, and to get rid of the terrible cost of being cheap?
Well, I've been trying to encourage my clients and the design students I get to work with to invest in themselves. We've been talking a lot about generational wealth, right? And passing down generational wealth. And although that's come up a lot in terms of the racial injustice we've been talking about a lot the last several months, generational wealth applies across the board, but also to interior design. The reason why we have antiques and vintage pieces that were made, decades and hundreds of years ago is because back then people weren't going out and buying all new everything. They were passing down heirlooms and great pieces of furniture and mirrors and whatnot from one generation down to the other because that was what they could afford, and they wanted to keep that within their family, and that's how they accumulated generational wealth over a period of time. So if you're buying very cheap, poorly made furnishings, it doesn't do anything for the environment, obviously, as far as improving our situation. That's why I always, I'm a big proponent for buying antique furniture, buying antique light fixtures, and doing that versus all reproductions. But also there's nothing to pass down, there's nothing to talk about, because if it's poorly made and it's cheap, it's not going to last to be passed down from the decades, to your family. So I tell my clients and my students, try to design and purchase well once. It's better to have a few well-made, great pieces that have a great conversation, a great touchstone to pick up on, to converse about around dinner tables, versus having a house full of brand new cheap stuff that will fall apart in time and really has no sentimental value.
One way I kind of combat that thinking is, we're in a day and age right now where I would say most of my younger clients, they want everything yesterday. It's like not a matter of, oh, well, I don't want to wait 8 weeks for that. Or so what we found is the process of our installation, the way we install everything in one day, whether it's a 5-bedroom house, a 3-bedroom apartment, whatever it is. We install everything in one day. And what it does is it almost acts as sort of a makeover TV reveal, sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So people come in and they have that wow moment. And so when they know that that's going to happen, they're much more willing to wait for beautiful goods, quality items, because it feels more like a whole experience that gets them really excited. And it's like Christmas morning, your whole house is coming together all in one day. And so that's kind of a way that we combat that. Well, I'm just going to get it now, and I can just get it now. But yeah, cheap is one of the most expensive things you can do. And our poor landfills are exploding at the seams. So I think having people know they're going to have quality and it's going to all be done in one shot is a way that we kind of combat that thinking.
Yeah. I would, and to sort of add to that, I would say, which I totally agree with Libby. I mean, obviously coming from, sort of my space where I'm doing, residential, commercial, and also media and television stuff, as we all have done. I think that, you learn that sort of wow moment where people come in and they're so excited that it's soup to nuts, and it is an experience. But one of the things that's really wonderful about that is that it does make it possible that when you're ordering sort of the core pieces, maybe the sofas and different upholstered items and rugs that need to be maybe custom cut or custom made for a certain room or things like that, wall coverings and things that need to be ordered and installed. That happens, and then you come in with these layers of things that are vintage or antique or just pre-owned, basically, that you find, and you just come in and you just kind of bring it all in, and there's this great opportunity to do those final layers with things that are kind of let's call them one of a kind at whatever level. So I think that's really, sort of adding on to what Libby was just saying. But what Corey, what you were mentioning, which I totally agree with, I do love the idea of having things that are, I love a mix of things where it represents where we are today and what we're doing, where we were, you know, where we are, where we were, where we are, and where we're going. I love going into a space and having that narrative because I think it's so important. Whether you're talking about, it just tells a wonderful story, and hopefully it's an authentic story to the people that live there. But I will say that I really believe in I call it the democracy of design, just because I think it's more, it flows more easily. But I do think that it's important that there are things in the world that are affordable, because there are people out there that maybe don't have these things that are being passed down, and they don't have access to the cost of the goods that are the best things or the best that they can buy yet, for whatever reason. And they still want to have that experience of building their dream, their home, in their environment. And I think that democracy of design isn't about not having things at every price point, but things that are affordable should hopefully, as we move forward, be made out of materials that are sustainable, that are recyclable, that are thoughtful. They should be made with finishes that are not going to, you know, that are going to take a less of a toll on the environment. And so it would be really wonderful if kids going to college, or people buying their first apartment, or they're in their first rental, or whatever it is, I think it'd be great for that demographic to be able to go out and access things that are affordable but are thoughtful. And I think if we see this in, years ago, automobiles, nothing was recyclable. Now most automobiles are almost like it's a high level of recycled components, first of all. Second of all, now you have this situation where years ago, I remember when I was growing up, the only people that talked about safety, sort of the economy of how the gas was being used, were expensive cars. Inexpensive cars, seatbelts, maybe you had them, maybe you didn't, you know what I mean? It was like airbags that were 12 years behind in that category. So there was a disparity, between what you could have if you were spending a lot of money or you were entry level. Today in the automotive world, you have almost the same things in every car. It's just packaged differently with it, and so I think that that's where we need to get in the world of design, is that we have to, as designers, be able to give our clients that can afford certain things what we think is best in that situation. But I will tell you what I think is best for a young couple starting out who are both trying to pay off student loans. I think that's a very different thing than I would recommend to my clients who maybe have 3 homes and are, maybe travel without having to go to a public airport. So I think it's really important that we as designers make sure that we understand all the demographics and not just the demographics of the people that typically hire us. I think it's important that we understand that, but to really be, I think, an impactful human, to be a good neighbor, and also to be a great designer, you have to really understand that, like, I call some of those things, those inexpensive things that are thoughtfully made, creatively, they're watered down. If they're done well, and if they're done in a way that hopefully they're not going to be, just like something that will end up in a landfill in a negative way, I think that that is something that helps get people to the place where they can start to make bigger, better, and smarter, or maybe even more beautiful choices. But I do think that it is somewhat of our job, hopefully, in what we're talking about today, is to get these big box stores to maybe start being more demanding on who they're getting their products from, so that the products are more thoughtful, not only in their design, but in their impact on the world around them.
Yes, because part of that cost is, in addition to the environmental cost, is the human cost. And what we don't see from a labor perspective. And it kind of mirrors, frankly, how this country was built, on the backs of people of color. It's a part of this white-centric economy, and I think that's all coming to light. How do we reconcile how that some of our successes were built on severe injustices, and how do we keep the conversation going?
I mean, I would start by saying, I think just having the ability to communicate about it and to be actually, I think one of the most important things in this world of transparency is to say, I don't understand. Like, tell me, explain this to me. And not to feel like by not understanding or not knowing something it's okay to not know that or not understand. If your journey is to understand, if your journey is to be a part of the solution, there's nothing wrong with saying, I didn't realize that using that word was hurtful. Or there are certain things I think that we're all learning as we're moving forward, whether it's gender equality, we're all sort of navigating so many of these things. And I think that part of it is also being sympathetic to the idea that these things are, they should have been so obvious. And sometimes, as we all have learned in life, sometimes the most obvious things, when you're in it, you don't even see it until somebody or something wakes you up. And I think right now, we're all having this big sort of wake up moment. And I think part of it is also listening to different people, being open and saying, oh my gosh, I know that I understood this, but I certainly didn't understand it at this level. And I think that's what a lot of people are feeling about a lot of things. I think whether we're talking about politics, it is almost just, and Libby, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that having this reset moment, I think we are all, I hope everybody is realizing what's truly important, and it doesn't mean that the world is going to just all of a sudden flip and change, but it just feels like we have an opportunity right now to keep the dialogue open, transparent, and and just real and just straightforward. It's just this really, if there's a silver lining coming out of all of what has happened recently, is that it's almost like this aha moment, or like you said, Libby, the reset. It's like when your phone is kind of all screwed up and you can't get it to do anything, and you turn it off and then you turn it back on, and it's like, oh, it just needed a moment so that you could actually, because God, you turn your phone off for a minute and you're just like, what? We're inside? I have no idea.
I think the thing too in keeping the conversation going is kind of what Thom said too about listening, not just hearing the other side or hearing what people are saying, but really listening and really processing it and seeing what are actions that you can do and what are ways that you can change and what are things that we could all do. So I think when you really are listening and hearing what people are saying, then you're able to take action and move forward. And I think too, it will be also not just keeping the conversation going, but it is gonna go into action. And I think as the world opens up and eventually there will be a vaccine and we all will be out in public places together without masks at some point. I think that will be the time also to keep action and actual movement of what we can do happening.
Yeah.
And I think too that the human race is a beautiful thing. Our race, our species is beautiful to behold, but we are very much like a relay team, right? A relay runner runs his or her lap and they pass the baton to the next runner. And so I think for people of color, they've been running this race as far as for equality for a very long time, and they're ready to pass off the baton to the next runner. And so now others are recognizing the need to have the conversation at the dinner table amongst themselves where there may be no people of color present, and figuring out ways to make things more equitable. So they're running that race. And so it all comes back around in a circular formation, but we're all on the same team. And one of the analogies I've been using with the press is about, the analogy of 10 toes. If you break one of your 10 toes, it doesn't negate or cancel out the value of the other 9 toes. It just simply means that right now, this one toe is fractured and broken, and it needs to be bound up and healed. Until that happens, the entire human body will hobble along in pain. And so I think that there are 10 toes. There are so many different types of pockets of humanity in our race. But if it's not the Black Lives Matter, if it's not that toe that's broken, it may be the LGBTQ toe that's broken one day, or the women's rights toe that's broken one day, or the Jewish community's toe that's broken one day, or the Latino community's toe is broken one day. There are so many toes. And so I think that on the one hand, we have to be thinking about how to help all the toes, right, that are broken and fractured and are suffering injustice and improper behavior. But we also have to think to an extent selfishly, because at the end of the day, if I don't help this community, whether it be the women's rights movement or the LGBTQ or the Black Lives Matter, if I don't help these people fix their problems, then my community will be next. And that is how entire civilizations have fallen throughout history, from people being silent, turning a blind eye, and seeing people of a certain background or a certain religious belief system come in and wipe out folks for who they were or who they worshiped or who they loved. So we have to start thinking about that we're all on one team, we're all on one foot, we're all one race. And if we don't start figuring out ways to defend each other, even if the issues do not personally affect us, the entire human race will hobble along in pain until we figure it out.
One of the things I wanted to say in regard to that is that I feel like I've asked people that have gone through different, things that have happened that we weren't around for. We were very young when it happened. I said, do you ever remember, driving through the countryside in a place where you would think this group is definitely probably feels like they're not connected to this urban issue that's happening in New York City or LA or Miami or Chicago. I feel like what's really interesting is to see the diversity of people that are coming to support all of these issues. And when you're driving through the country and you see signs that are supporting things that are going on, that they're clearly, not only are they not a part of it, it must be like watching a movie for them, but they're putting these signs out in front of their house because they feel like, I don't know if that's ever, I wonder if that's ever happened before, because it feels very interesting to me that I do think that it's interesting to see people of different backgrounds, different religions, different ethnicities, cultures are literally helping each other out in this moment. And I think that feels unique to this kind of global shutdown. And I think that is one of the things that I think is making this feel different, maybe, or feel more optimistic or hopeful that we are, we're working as like those 2 feet and saying, hey, we're not individual toes. We actually work in concert. So let's get this sorted, because this is all part of making the community of toes work together, and it's like, so I think that what you're saying is so perfect. And I do think that it seems like everyone I ask says to me, people that are like my dad's friends who are in their 80s are like, never seen this before. never seen this where, like, you know, I even asked, you know, people of a certain age, like, hey, what's going on in like your community, at your retirement community? What are people saying? And it's like, it's like so amazing what they're saying. You know, the majority of people there are like, this is awesome, this needs to happen. And you're like, wow, that's to me amazing. So I definitely think this moment has this kind of, has so many people's attention, and it has made it clear to so many people that thought things were fine, that it's just not fine. You know, it's just not where it needs to be. And, you know, whether we're talking about, you know, the glaciers, you know, melting, or we're talking about social injustice, it's just, there's just stuff that we need to really recognize as an issue. It's not going to go away. It's
Absolutely.
only going to get worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. We want to save, time is just flying, and we want to save just a few minutes. We do have questions coming in, so let's try to get a couple questions in from the audience, and Susan has those.
Yes, and so if you have a question, you can send it in by the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Here's the first question. Do any of the designers talk with their clients about the really difficult subjects in our field, such as purchasing certified products like Global Organic Textile Standard for textiles, for instance, to make sure that they are not inadvertently buying cotton from fields that make use of child labor and other forced labor? Another issue would be PVC that has a terrible impact on Black communities specifically, and other impoverished communities, because PVC leaches toxins being made, being used, and at the end of its life. So what do y'all think?
I mean, for me, one of the best resources that I use when I'm looking for different manufacturers and people that, whether it's their recycling program or, you know, the work and the, you know, how they treat their workers and what that situation is on the SFC website. There's a great landing page called the resources page. And for me, I know that has vetted different companies, manufacturers, what are their processes, and how do they treat their employees. So that's a great place to start for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, as designers, we're only going to start to get more questions, more inquiries about this. And so, you know, that's why I think the Sustainable Furnishings Council is a great resource for designers, because it gives you the ability to really have those hard and fast answers when the clients do ask.
Yeah. I find that clients really are, you know, it's really the professional's responsibility to bring some of these things to light, because clients every once in a while will ask a question, but I think that they're looking at so many factors, from, you know, timeline and budget and getting the kids to school, and like they've got their world that they're in. And I think that what we do as professionals is we bring sort of these ideas to the table. And it's like, I think one of the things that I talk to clients a lot about is that when we're looking at rugs and we're looking at fabrics for sofas that they have children, whenever you bring that into the fold and you say, hey, you know, let's really be thoughtful about doing like a beautiful, like really like handmade fabric for the family room sectional, because this is a fabric that you guys are going to be sleeping on and laying on and watching TV on, and like all of a sudden you bring it into their world in a way where they say, oh, that is probably going to be a little bit more expensive. It's going to be locally, it's something that's made in, let's say, Connecticut, and it feels just like incredible, and it's, you know, it's just a kind of this amazing fabric. But it's also, you're selling it as like the health and wellness of it, also the luxury of it, also the durability of it. There's so many, and you start to bring those layers in when you're talking about vegetable dyed rugs and locally sourced. And, you know, if you just say those things and there's really no reason to sort of make it connect with them so that they understand the importance of it, And you do it in a way, I think, where it feels organic to the conversation, and it's not like you're sort of coming out of left field, like, hey, I just want to let you know about recycled springs. It's like some of those things I don't even talk to them about, because I just know that when I order something, I want to order it from somebody that I believe in. And that's what they're trusting me for. But when I'm giving them a choice, if there were finishes to choose from, let's say with a manufacturer that were water-based and some that were not, you know, that were chemical-based, I would say, hey, let's try to use, like, let's use the things that are not going to off-gas. Let's use, let's use the adhesives for wall coverings that are low VOC. Let's use low VOC paints. Let's work with things that, let's know that are the things that we are going to have made that are not going to be vintage or antique. Let's know that they're being made out of certified materials, you know, because, and that's something that we as the professionals, you know, if the client says, hey, why did you choose this manufacturer over that manufacturer? And you say, A, I have a great relationship with them. B, I know what they're doing is the right thing, and that's important to us, you know, and then the client goes, oh, wow, that's great. It's not, I would, you know, I feel like that there's some things that make sense for the clients to be brought into the loop, and there's other things I think that they rely on us as professionals to make really the best decisions for them, and to create that dialogue, but to create it in a way where it's part of the story of them feeling good about, you know, they feel like they live in a healthy world, in an environment that the person that they've hired is being thoughtful about, you know, the lighting, the finishes, and so on.
This sort of follows on that previous question, and it is about whether any of y'all have policies. You know, we have our wood furniture scorecard initiative going on now. We're in the third year of doing this assessment of retailers to see whether they have a policy for how they source wood furniture, whether it's a robust one and whether they're implementing it well. So this asker knows that many companies that score high on that are the less expensive companies like IKEA and Crate and Barrel and all the brands of the Williams Sonoma Group. They have robust policies. Y'all working with more different companies, do you have policies that you can point to, and is that a useful way to introduce concepts without seeming patronizing or preachy when you're talking to your clients, is the question.
We don't have a stated policy within our company per se that is communicated in our contracts to clients, but we are always asking manufacturers that we partner with, what is your policy when it comes to sustainable initiatives? And we make it clear to them that that's not going to necessarily preclude them from getting business from us, but it certainly is an attractive earmark. That is good for us. And we make it into a really great sales point when we're pitching to our clients, who are always appreciative of that. So we probably should, as a company, maybe bake that into our policies. It's just that I would be kind of concerned about that being a situation where we can't get what we need a certain way, that now we back ourselves into a corner. But we do think it's important to at least keep that conversation going and look for ways to gently nudge and prod our manufacturers to do more.
Well, you know, one of the things I think is really the most important thing, it's not so much the clients that I think we need to get on board. I think it's the design community as a whole, because the clients follow the design community.
Yeah.
The design community is not following the client at a certain level. You know, they're coming to us for our expertise and for our professionalism. And if we as designers say, we do not work with non-VOC, you know, paints, then the manufacturers will now provide us with what we require for our projects, and what we are, you know, specing. And so I think that really the first step is to have the design community say, okay, like what we were just talking about, enough is enough. Like, let's demand these things. Let's say as a group, as a big group, we all come together and we say, yes, we, like, if you don't have a robust sort of program, as much as we love your stuff, we're going to actively try to not encourage our clients to buy this, even though we think it's one of the greatest looking things that we could find at that price point. And so I think that, you know, that's where our power comes in. And that's where I think we change. It changes from the designers requiring the manufacturers to give us what we want, and then the homeowners or the clients or the offices that we're designing, or the hotels or the restaurants we're designing, those people and those clients will be like, wow, it's amazing how you guys as professionals in your industry demanded a change. And I think that that's what we're seeing happening around us right now. And if you were to look at who has the ability to make this grassroots movement, it's going to be us, but we have to do it where we have to have 95% of the designers on board saying, we're not going to do it. We can't do this. Like, if we're going to make this happen, it's, you know, it's like two parents. You know, you can have one parent saying, no, you can't go to the party, and one parent saying yes. You know, they're just, you lose all your power. So, and it's a mixed message, and nobody walks away with it understanding what's really going to happen. So I think that we've got to come together and really make the manufacturers understand that if they want our dollars that come from our clients, then they have to give us what the products that we think are the correct products for people to have in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yeah.
I think we're at time.
We're
Yeah.
questions. So for those of you who had some excellent questions, know that the panelists will be getting the questions, and I am committed to our continuing to address the issues of environmental justice as part of our work ongoingly. So I thank you all. I know, Erika, you want to say something too. Let me not cut you off.
No, of course. Well, Susan, thank you so much for fighting the good fight, and keep up the good work. And same, Libby, Thom, and Corey, you're all amazing and very, very inspiring. And I feel like we just scratched the surface. So let's do this again. Thank you for making the world a more beautiful and, most important, a better place as designers. So thank
One
you.
room at a time.
Yeah, good. Thank you all.
Enjoy your day.
It's so good to see everyone. Stay healthy and safe. See you soon
Bye.
in the real world. Bye.
Bye.